5:34 here. We'll call the meeting to order here on the 27th of September. First order of business, we will just approve the minutes from the 23rd of August. Are there any changes or adjustments to the minutes from the last meeting? All right, we will accept the minutes. And then, so I know we have a couple, well, we have John here who had sent a note earlier today. So just looking at any comments to the from the public that are not on the agenda or adjustments to the agenda. So John, I know you sent in a note about some the items that the select board were talking about around no parking zone, camping zone. Do we want to try and have a few minutes to discuss that tonight on the agenda?
I could just address the committee very briefly. I have a previous commitment and then leave it to you to decide what to do.
Okay, yep, we can spend about 5 minutes here talking about that and then get into Gary and his presentation here tonight. That'd be great.
Oh,
so John.
May I? All right, John Rankin from Church Street. I tuned into the meeting of the select board last week, thinking there was going to be a discussion of parking at the site of the former water tower on Jericho Road, and it turned into, at least in part, a discussion of unhoused people who were or might be living in Richmond. And I've heard discussion that the 21 committees in the town don't always communicate fully with each other. So I just wanted the housing committee to be aware of the discussion. I wasn't going to offer any advice as to whether you should be involved or not, or what, if anything, the town should do about it. I'm just bringing it to your attention. And now that you know, I thank you for responding.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, really appreciate that. I wasn't aware of that discussion either. I don't know, Virginia, if you had heard, or Connie, about that.
I'd heard of it in the community, and I am very glad that we get a chance to think about how we might address that at the housing committee. So thank you, John. Very helpful to have your push in that direction. I appreciate it.
Yes, I also went and viewed the archived tape, so I'm seeing where they're coming from. It's sort of easy to get down the rabbit hole of the select board meetings. I have to say, I went on to listen to a bunch of other things that were also of concern and of interest. But yeah, it's another one of those difficult problems that it's good to have us think about whether it's in our scope or not.
Okay. So maybe what we could do is, it sounds like the select board was looking for a recommendation from or some recommendations on their October 2nd for their October 2nd meeting. So maybe if at the end of today we have some additional time, we could revisit that. Or we can add it as an agenda item to our next meeting to talk a little bit more in depth about what they're.
Why don't you put it on the end of this meeting, Mark, and we'll try to spend a few minutes with it before their next meeting.
Okay. Okay. Great. Will do. Well, appreciate it, John. Sound like you maybe had to drop. You're welcome to stay. Or if you had to move on.
I will drop. Thank you for your consideration.
Great. Thanks a bunch.
Bye.
Bye, John.
Okay. All right. So moving on to our next agenda item, presentation from you, Gary, on increasing housing here in Richmond.
Great. So there's a Western Gateway Scoping Committee that I think it's starting to wrap up their work, and they're trying to figure out a way to connect the village to the park and ride and to beyond that out to the old home park. And I've came up with an idea for it that I presented to, you're now the 8th committee or commission or group in town. And I think it's one of the two options that they're narrowed down looking at. The other option is basically following right along Route 2 with a bike lane, maybe. I don't know just how, I don't think it's a separate path. It might be a separate path, but it basically follows along the edge of Route 2. And the reason I thought your committee might be interested was just a conversation I had with Bard Hill several months ago, that he said he had talked to some of the housing groups in Burlington that might be interested in coming to Richmond, and was told that they would not be interested in doing anything in the gateway until there was connectivity for pedestrians and bikes. So I just wanted to present to you, I'll try not to take up much of your time, my proposal as an alternative, and basically for your information and feedback. And there has been some pretty good interest in some of the other committees and groups to try to find a way to move this forward. So here goes. If I share my screen, I will try to get my presentation up.
Something he got wind of, maybe from an old Viking book. Those translators of ancient writing came across some strange secrets.
Did I lose him?
Who's Peggy says? Well, you know, it just takes brains to find things.
Where do I go? Down here?
Well, your skin looks like a map. And there's ancient writing on it. Must help killing.
I gotta start over. How do I get that?
You gotta click
Later.
click out of that. Click on it. The whole thing. Click out of the mail.
Look, it was commanded
There you
by
go. All right,
All right, I'm back.
now share screen.
Share screen. I'm such an idiot with this stuff.
Okay,
All right, so now I'll try.
yeah, now, this is what you're sharing out of.
Do I go to this now?
Yeah, try that. And then click share.
We're getting there.
Yeah, there.
All right, so the idea for this proposal came from the time I spent living in Boston, and Frederick Law Olmsted designed this park system that's I think it's 7 miles long, and it runs along what was swamp or wetlands, and it just is an incredible park, and kind of has inspired me to use that as a model. And one thing I liked about it is in sections, they have 2 lanes. They have on the right here, they have strictly pedestrian lane, and then this other lane to the left is bike and pedestrian lane, you know. But there is one that's basically bike free. There's a lot of different types of trails within that, the offshoot trails, miles and miles of offshoot trails. When Frederick Law Olmsted started, it was really just considered wasteland, and now it's really a tourist attraction. It's a transportation route for thousands of people every day. Here again, on one side of the drainage way here, we have shared pedestrian bike. The other side is just pedestrian. Beautiful underpasses, under road crossings. This is one area where it jumps out onto the road, So there are sections where it does follow. This one section for probably a half a mile follows right along the road. Frederick Law Olmsted built these islands for birds to be safe from pedestrians. There's areas that look somewhat like the area down near the mobile station there, where it's just a sea of cattails. There's areas that go uphill, climbing trails that aren't your typical climbing trails. Trails are beautiful, granite steps. So I've taken these photos. I'm not going to show them here because the screens are too small, but starting from the village, this is coming down, dropping out of the village. And this first area, what I proposed was, if this land is available, this area, it's quite mostly wetland, to try to get the trail off the road a little bit there. Now, there's wetland implications that I've met with Tina Heath, and we talked about this project quite a bit. And one thing she said was it's easier to get like a trail that's like a walking trail or a one lane or one tire width wide trail than it is to put in a 10-foot wide paved trail. So there might be places where we'd have to do the alternative route of other proposal of having a paved lane out there, but there might be ways of get people off the road and something that's a more primitive trail. I took these, this is from the end of Tilden Avenue, just before it swings up to the cemetery. You can see on the right there, that cemetery road. There is an old road bed. I think it was a road that was kind of laid out, but not ever built. This drops down. We're looking right through it. It's a very hard picture to see anything. And it comes out at the old Resourceful Renovators right at the base of, along the base of the hill of the cemetery. So that might be a place to put another pedestrian way so people that are in that neighborhood could just drop right down, or single tire bike path potential there. And then this is from the old Resourceful Renovator building lot, looking back, and you can see there are some wetlands there, but there is also, depending on what permitting is allowed, there's possibilities to get it off the road a little bit. And then the first spot that's pretty tight, and probably the proposal is the same for both, basically, is that to have it basically on the road. Long term, what I propose is that Route 2 moves over to the right in this picture about 12 feet, so that what is now the lane of Route 2 leaving town would become a separate bike path, and it'd be a new lane. I think that would be a long-term proposal. The other thing, the possibility is to kind of step the bank up so that the bike path portion is not right even with Route 2, but you might step up like 3 feet high and have it fenced. So if a car does go off the road, it's hitting an embankment and not somebody on a bike or walking. This is the other side of the road. It is possible to steepen that bank a little, or to just keep the same pitch and try to work out something with the fire family to get a little bit of land there. That's looking in the other direction, same situation. It becomes less steep as you go out there. One thing I'll just point out is that you can see where this land is wet, and this was before that summer flood, not the first flood, but the flash flood, rerouted on Willis Hill, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, rerouted the stream on Willis Hill, so it no longer basically goes under the bridge at the corner, and it cuts through the runout on the sledding hill and goes through a much smaller culvert. So that's something the land trust is trying to figure out if we can get a permit to put it back where it was, because right now it's just going out onto the forest field. So now the next section is through the gateway, where the developed portion of the gateway. And what I propose there is, here's on the left-hand side is the 3-rod road, and I drew this up before the court case that the decision came out this summer that shows that Route 2 actually is a 4-rod road. And so there's actually another 16 and a half feet of roadway. And so that'd be 8 feet, 3 inches on each side of the road, because I think they've determined that the center line of the road is basically the center line of the right of way. So there is a little more land to the right than what I show here. But what I propose on the right is that we've figured out a way, either through purchase or other incentives, to get the path off the road and over in the setback area. I keep trying to move it over. Can you guys see the whole drawing? Because a lot of what I'm seeing is cut off by everyone's face.
I can see it
We can
from
see it.
a property line on the left edge to a new property line in red on the right edge. So
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so I don't see that, so I'll keep trying to move it over and messing up. So what I propose there is, in that right of way, to have the town water line and the town sewer line. And by putting it through that section, it'd be much less money than having to build it out in the road right away, where you have flag people and you have traffic tie-ups and everything. And when you're done, you could shape that strip up so that you've basically got the basic contours for the path. And initially, you know, depending on funding, you could, if you don't have money to pave it, you could just put down some SurePack or some other road base, and you'd have a basic path. And even if you didn't have money for that, you could start with just a 3-foot wide path, and people would share it, walking and bicycles. And over time, when funding comes, you could add that on. But I think that's a critical part of this proposal, is to get people off the road wherever we can. And you can see that this is from the old farmhouse, not the Willis farm, but kind of the other end before you get to Great Escape. You can see it's pretty flat, pretty open for a lot of it. There's some places that would take a lot of reshaping, but wouldn't be that hard to put a path through there. And this is from the same spot looking in the other direction. Again, it's pretty viable. You have to move the sign, but otherwise, the pretty straight shot. Wouldn't be power poles to move. And so then the next third is, or the third out of the 4th sections, because I kind of view this as in 4 sections that you could do independently of each other. And that goes from, on the kind of the right center where all the trees are, there's a hillside that's still owned by the part of the old Thompson farm. And then I would run it along the back side of the mobile land. And I think, well, first off, I think the town should buy that, how many acres, might be 4 or 5 acres, that little hillside, and turn it into a little park. So it'd be a place for people to stop and hang out, and kids could climb up this nice little hill. And then it would wrap over, it'd cross over the old, where the old substation was. And then the dark line follows the line of the boundary just on the mobile land. I talked to the new owners of the mobile, and he said, you know, it's an idea he'd be willing to explore further. It wouldn't really affect him in any way because it's on the other side of this wetland that's right behind the mobile station. So it would just skirt around him. And here's from the mobile looking back, you know, the proposal of putting it right along Route 2 is, I think, more problematic because it just drops right down into a wetland. This is that little hillside that Thompson had, and you could carry the path right along up onto that. It kind of follows the right contour of putting the path up on the old. I don't really know why that's built, but it would get people above the traffic safer, and it also carries them at the right angle over to the part where the mobile land begins. Here's a shot from the mobile again, and you can see the there is an area along the fence line of the interstate below where that car is. It is out of wetlands along all of it. So very possible to put it between putting it along Route 2 and putting it along there. It seems much more viable to put it along there. And whether the water and sewer wants to follow that line through there or not would be their choice if it ever expands out beyond the gateway.
Gary,
Yeah,
is that in the right of way of the highway?
which one?
The one that goes behind the mobile station? Are you proposing that it be in the right of way of the interstate?
No, this is, you can see the fence just barely. Can you see my cursor or not?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that is the interstate fence line. So I would propose putting it just on the mobile land if they're willing.
Okay, and is that out of the floodplain? That,
It's out of the floodplain and it's out of wetland. It is in the wetland buffer, but it's not in wetland.
oh, it's in the wetland buffer, so you'd have to get state permission to put it in the wetland buffer.
Yeah. And here's the current mobile map. And you can see the fence line. I think this is the fence line where the cursor is, and or maybe the other one. The dash line is the wetland boundary. And this is the proposed, or I guess approved one that's going to start construction before too long.
Mhm.
Originally, I thought there's this leftover pile from, I guess, from interstate construction. I was told by Chris Cole. I thought it was maybe from the mobile construction. And I was thinking they could use that to bridge over if mobile wanted a spur, but Chris said that they're using that and moving it so that they could expand the land at the new proposed mobile station. So
Yeah, I think they're taking that away so that that can be wetland,
right.
so that it can substitute for the wetlands that they're taking away.
So once you get onto the interstate land, my proposal is to do an underpass right about where the cursor is, under here, and then on the other side it would come out on this, and if you turn around, I would propose that you could carry it up the slope and put it, there's this turnaround wall that just as you drive in straight ahead, there's a retaining wall, and there's room, by removing one or two trees, there's room to run the path up there. So there wouldn't be any interference with traffic at all. The path would remain along this fence line. But here's like the one tree, I think. You know, if it's a really primitive path, you just have to do a little limbing. But if you're trying to reshape it for a 10-foot path, you probably have to remove one tree. And then come along this fence. on top of this area. And then dropping down the other way, slab down this hill. That's the same view the other way. And then do what they just did in Williston, which was steepen the banks and put a bike path through this area. They also did the same thing at the Colchester exit. So it wouldn't take a lot of imagination to make that happen. And then when you get out here, I'm trying to avoid putting people crossing these 3 roads for the entrance and exit of the ramp, and also going through that intersection with 117, which is really steep banks. So instead of going left here and crossing the roads, if you went right, it's really, I'd never really noticed it before, but I walked down in there, it's like a little park. It is really, you could do it kind of a direct route, kind of straight ahead, a little bit there, slightly left. Or you could go to the right, get out, take a bigger swing around. It's super attractive down there. And then right about where this car is, you do another underpass. And that's the view back from where the underpass would be. And then it pops you out kind of at the end. I'm sorry, I'm jerking everybody around here. Kind of at the end of the Cleary Stone Works. It would be a little bit to the left here, or I guess it's to the right here. This is kind of the end of Cleary Stone's property. So somewhere in this area. So there'd have to be some sort of bridging, but then it drops you right about here. And this is the entrance, one of the 2 entrances to the mobile home park. So it'd be well away from the Governor Peck and 117 intersection. It'd be a safe place to have a crossing. And then you'd be down there. So like kids, if they want to ride to school, come down, cross this road, and they wouldn't have to cross another road until they got to the Great Escape. And then go past those several driveways, get to the Willis Hill land, and there's already a trail from there up to school. So in terms of safety, I think it offers advantages over. I've done a lot of work on the front of my house and on scaffolding, and it amazes me how many people are texting as they're entering the bridge at my house. And I think about putting a bike path right along a road, where all it takes is a distracted driver to start plowing through people. I just think the more we can get them off the road, the safer it is. So that's my proposal.
Should we try to make it into one of those fjords?
Offer it for feedback, or just to let you know what's out there.
So Gary, I think I lost a little bit of what happens after the second underpass, which is going under the exit ramp from I-89 going north. Is that correct?
Right.
So where does that go to? That goes onto Governor Peck Road, right? Or
Right, yeah. So when it pops out of the underpass, there's probably I didn't measure 100 or 150 feet. It would probably have to be some sort of bridging because it drops down a lot right there and then back up to the road. So there'd probably have to be a bridge.
a bridge over Governor Peck?
No, not over Governor Peck, but to
Okay,
get
so-
from the where you come through on the underpass. Let me go back to see, I'm on the road here and it drops down.
Where is that? I don't know where that is somehow.
All right, so if you get on Governor Peck and you start driving, this is the first thing you see once you get maybe 200 or 300 feet down the road. This is
On the right. You see it on the right? Okay, yep, okay.
It's the beginning of the Cleary Stoneworks, and you know, he has a quarry somewhere else. I think he brings stone and works on it down in here and
Okay.
storage, but yeah. So I don't think we'd want to drop people all the way down and then back up, although I guess it's a possibility. Oh, hang on.
Would it have to go through his stoneworks? Man, I think that's
I think you could do it right at the end of the
where
stonework.
his yeah, property ends there. Okay.
Yeah.
But then how does it get across Governor Peck?
Just surface. Yeah.
So there's a crossing strip or something, or a crossing place, a walk, you know what I mean? A
Crosswalk.
crosswalk across Governor Peck. There's a crosswalk over
Yeah,
to
looks
the
like-
other side.
Looks like Gary froze up. I've seen this before, and yes, what it would do is it would his trail would spit out on Governor Peck right across from one of the entrances into Riverview.
Oh, the side entrance, the Governor Peck
Correct.
entrance. Okay, I
Correct,
see
not
what you
the
mean.
main one. Yeah,
Okay,
so the idea is the funnel is to have all that walkability get into the village and potentially to the
Right.
school also.
yep.
So-
I guess I didn't really know there was an entrance to the Riverview Commons on Governor Peck
Yeah.
Road. But,
Yeah.
okay, all right, I get it.
Oh, I think we
So,
lost
We
Gary
lost
there.
Gary, but he might be back soon. But this is a cool idea for multiple reasons. Because there is a link to housing, and there's also a link to safety and transportation and a whole bunch of things that our committee is interested in. And the select board, Bard and Jay, I know for sure, and I think the others as well, are interested in not just making Richmond nicer, which is a good thing to do, but making Richmond more functional so that it's easy to use and so people can get around it safely. I mean, I don't know that we'll recreate the emerald necklace, which looks like so awesome. But for that stretch that goes through the area that Gary's talking about, I feel like that's the kind of thing that you use ARPA money for. It's to invest in the town's future and address housing and lift everybody up and create a more equitable, safe, pleasant, fun, shareable environment for everybody. I think that's so important, and I would gladly be part of that, although I don't know anything technically. The suggestions that Gary has made are, I think, really powerful and very, very helpful.
So can I just jump in and say my battery died and I had to get back on, so I missed the last 3 or 4 minutes. I shouldn't be allowed to touch computers.
Yeah, we totally decided everything, Gary, so it's fine.
Yeah.
What else would you like to say, Gary?
Nothing. I was going to say that Chris Coles, who's head of the transportation committee, and I think, was he the head of AOT at one time?
He was the head of CCTA at one time, and he's been in transportation in the government, although he
Okay.
was the Secretary of Buildings and Grounds most recently, so he
Oh.
wasn't, anyway. But
Anyway, he had mentioned when I presented to them that it's possible. I mean, the section through, once you get the interstate land, is clearly the most expensive. And he said that because it's all on their land, that they could just make that their own project, which I think he was saying that it wouldn't involve even a town match. That could just be something it could kind of do in-house. So the
we just have to persuade them to do it somehow, to want to do it.
right. He also said that there is money out there for communities that are trying to connect with traditionally underserved areas of their town. So that might be a way to help persuade AOT that this would make I think, an attractive way to get to town that people would want to ride. I mean, putting a path right next to Route 2 works, I think, for commuters, but I don't think anybody really wants to ride right next to traffic.
Nobody does.
Correct.
So do you think that the piece that's along the developed part of the gateway that is a lot in wetlands, that the wetlands people would go for that?
Tina said the first step is to make the case why this is a really good idea. And then kind of lay out what level you want to build it to. And she said it's a lot easier to get, simple trails permitted. What I didn't ask her was, what if you build a simple trail and you find you have a lot of use? Is it then easier to then show the necessity to upgrade it so that, it'd be a multi-step process? Or
Mhm.
not?
Yeah, I would give an update that the Transportation Committee, we have moved ahead with the Western Gateway project. I mean, and I know that a lot of Gary's inputs is now being considered with this project. So that's going to be landing soon. They've moved along. D&K has moved along pretty fast on that. And Dan Malik and all, and I know that we have another scoping meeting, I believe next week. Might be the following week. I'd have to look at my schedule. But work is definitely moving forward as far as the study goes. So that's just a little update.
What are they working on? Is it a study to see if like a feasibility study, or is it?
Yeah, so at this point, it's a feasibility study to try to get some intermodal connections along Route 2. And it's also associated with what's known as the pinch point study also, which are these pinch points are limiting factors for everything that we want to do. And that's actually been completed, the pinch point study. So they're parallel studies that are going on right now.
And I mean, it's been considered for at least 20 years, Gary, or right? I mean, a path along Route 2. Everybody thinks that this is our highest priority, and we've never been able to really convince AOT that. But maybe they just did something a little more ambitious than a little path along Route 2,
Yeah, sometimes big projects are easier to do than little projects.
We get it on the map, I mean, it would put Richmond on the map, really, for sure.
At the last Trails Committee meeting, it was brought up and there was discussion about how they could get involved to try to push this proposal forward by maybe teaming up with the other bike group in town, the not town connected group. And when I went before the Conservation Commission, they were very positive, and they asked if there's anything they can do to move this version forward. So it's been.
Did you take it to AARP as well?
To ARPA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried twice
AARP.
to have Jay put me on the schedule, and he wouldn't do it. So I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
So what do you see as next steps with this, Gary?
Well, I think at some point before too long, the select board is going to pick one version over the other. So anything any group can do to support this more ambitious version, because I think the money is more. I don't think it necessarily has to be if you break it down into sections and get creative on stuff. I think it's, particularly in the gateway where it's developed, if you tie it in when you do the water and sewer line, you could do it for a very reasonable amount of money. So I think it'll go before the select board. I'm a little leery of that right now, but just because Jay wouldn't even put me on the schedule with ARPA, I think it kind of showed his hands how he feels about it. But
well, he's away for the moment, so
okay,
he's on sabbatical.
We'll have a special meeting then before he gets back.
Well, I can't speak to what Jay's proclivities are, but I mean, I would say that your plan has been universally lauded. So he would be an outlier if he wasn't supporting this, to be honest with you. I know the transportation committee definitely likes it. We have this in Virginia, didn't we have this? We had this presentation from you at the planning commission, did we not? A couple months
From
ago?
Gary. Well, that was in association with the housing, with some housing that Gary had proposed in the Gateway, a housing plan with,
But yeah, but I didn't present this plan as part of that.
Okay,
no.
okay.
No, but I have gone to transportation, conservation, trails, Richmond Land Trust, Cemetery Committee, Western Gateway Scoping Committee, and the Parking Advisory Committee. But
Yeah.
and at some point I wanted to present it to the planning commission, but I didn't know if it's anything you guys wanted to see yet.
Yeah, I think we would be amenable to seeing it. But for this committee, the housing committee, I mean, obviously it would be making the housing connection. Like
Yeah.
Connie pointed out, you know, it's making the underserved housing connectivity, and our goal on the planning commission and on this committee has been to increase housing. So this would certainly be a way to do it.
Right.
So it's good from that point of view.
So it's most
So-
impressive, and ironically,
So
if
I
you-
mean, I don't want to step on this committee's time right now, though, but I'm thinking that maybe we should discuss this tomorrow, Virginia, if we want to get Gary onto the planning commission. Because the more boards
Sure.
that are supporting
Yeah.
it, the better I believe you have, a better chance you have.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll put you on an agenda sometime, Gary, soon, and if
Gary,
you want to present it to the planning
do you
commission.
have any idea what the ballpark package dollar-wise is for this four-part proposal? Is it many
no.
millions? Is it?
I don't. I think that's part of the
Any millions?
open committee is trying to put some dollars to it. But
Okay. Well, I'd sure like to know when discussions are coming up that need public support, because I'd be glad to show up.
great.
I mean, some of it will depend on if we could persuade the Agency of Transportation to take on those underpass pieces.
Right.
You know, that's a significant amount that would be reduced for the
Yeah.
cost, which we wouldn't have to look at the numbers, because numbers are scary, right?
I know.
Numbers scare people,
Right.
but
Unless they're good numbers, you know.
so what are we calling this proposal? The jade necklace, the
I think the
stone
scoping-
necklace, I don't
the
know.
scoping committee is, I think we're calling it the Emerald Trail. Not original, but it's not the
Right.
not the Emerald Necklace, so it's not exactly copying Boston.
Right.
The emerald anklet,
Yeah.
possibly, or the emerald bracelet, or maybe the emerald earring. I don't know.
Just not the Emerald City, okay?
Right.
No, that's bad.
So Keith,
Great.
do you think when it gets to the select board, if letters of support from committees would be a good way to do it, or?
I think so. I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt. That's for sure. I mean, it will be ultimately the recommendation of the transportation committee to the select board, you know, on what preferred alternative they're going to go for. And I believe that there are 3 alternatives, and I think one of them is a no build. You know, that's the board you want to hit up for sure.
Okay.
Prior to the select board.
But I think letters to the select board would be helpful too. I mean, if they get a whole packet of letters from all the different committees,
Yeah.
all like 10 committees are in support of this for different reasons, I think that's got to influence their thinking.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe a letter that's, if your committee is willing to do something, a letter that isn't specific to one committee, but a general letter of support or something that could go to the transportation committee and to the select board or something.
Did you go home?
Yeah, oh, I think we should represent our point of view, I mean,
Yeah.
how does this tie into the mission of this committee and so forth?
Okay, great.
So,
Well, thanks for fitting me in. Appreciate it.
yes,
Sorry for the delay, but appreciate your time here tonight, Gary.
thanks for
timing?
making us think boldly rather than
Yes.
just
Yes.
a little bit, I mean, that's good. We need to think boldly sometimes.
Absolutely.
Gary, how soon would you need a letter to the select board? What would be the right timing? Do you have any idea?
Well, Keith, when do you think the transportation committee is going to be making a decision?
Oh, probably not for another couple months, but we certainly we can mock something up at some point here for our next meeting,
Okay.
which is
great.
in a month though. So
Okay.
Good. All right.
we can do that.
All right.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Great.
Great,
Thank you.
Have a
Good luck
evening.
with the technology.
Yeah. I'm such an idiot.
No,
Oh.
just a boomer. That's all.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, moving on to the next agenda item, last action that we had taken as the committee was to present to the select board our affordable housing presentation. And they gave some feedback to us. I think there were a couple kind of like asks that I took away from that was having some type of proposal from us as to like what would we propose, and then wanted some more data on what houses are currently affordable, I suppose, in Richmond. Those are at least a couple things that I took away from that, but curious to hear. I think we were all in attendance. What others' thoughts were.
Well, we didn't get a specific message from the select board about what they wanted. What we got was if you come up with a great idea, we're interested in listening to you.
Yes, that's the proposal.
Right. So there's and the town of Richmond clearly is not going to get into the competitive market of real estate buying. There might be some interest in incentives that could help other people buy and develop properties, but that's not going to be the town's business. So, and actually Gary Bressor's presentation is even more appealing because it doesn't make the town a property developer, it makes it an infrastructure enhancer for others to develop property, which is like a lever that turns another lever. So there's some value to thinking of housing as an outcome for which the town, as the planning commission already does, can engineer with the tools that it has more likely scenarios whether people will develop housing and make it available. So the long view may be, how do you develop that infrastructure that allows people to develop more housing? That was the thought that I came away with.
Yeah, it's
I like
sort
that
of a
perspective.
build it and they will come, approach to a certain extent. I know that is a philosophy that works at times. But I agree. I mean, the meeting, they didn't really give us any direction. And I know we were looking for finality. I think that we all realized that we're not going to get into that business. And we are kind of built out, especially in the areas that has water and sewer. I mean, Act 47 is going to, potentially increase the amount of housing units we can get in there. It allows us to do that, but we don't know if it'll happen. And we have a ways to go. And I think in philosophy, to be honest with you, I don't know what the town can do short of potentially having a shovel-ready site to sell. That has the infrastructure ready to go. And I think that's what we're gonna get a little bit of on the October 4th Planning Commission meeting with Susan from Jericho. She's gonna talk about schemes that they've used, schemes in a positive, not in a negative way. And I believe that they have purchased land. I'm not exactly sure what the presentation is on, but I'm pretty sure it is on the purchasing of land. And I don't think that that's really been discussed. We know Brown's Court is perfect for affordable housing. I mean, it just is. But then, what are you gonna do? You're gonna really destroy the character of that neighborhood. But we presented everything that we can, and I don't know how much more we can do. I think we need to change our focus. But that's just me as your staff member.
Yeah, and I mean, I felt that we got them to understand that this was not a problem that we were going to fix right now. I feel like absolved of that responsibility, and that we should just go ahead and do whatever we want to do. I mean, whatever we can think of doing. If we want to pursue any of these other properties like the Browns Court ball field or the FARs, or we can just go ahead and do that if we want. And if we can't do that, especially if we don't have more than 3 members, then we've told them that we can't do that. So I don't know, I felt like it clarified for me that they didn't have a huge commitment themselves to this idea, and that none of their constituents were pressuring them to create affordable housing, frankly. They weren't getting calls about that. They were getting calls about a lot of other things, but not about that. And so, like, we're on our own. And if we want to think of something that we want to do, then we should do it. And that's, we've sort of fulfilled this part of our original charge, which was the affordable housing charge. And, I don't think it means that we're necessarily going to completely drop all of these ideas that we've had, like the Browns Court ball field. We're not going to drop it completely. And the FAR farm, we're not going to drop it completely. We're going to reach out to Peter Brown at the Riverview Commons to see, but then we need the connectivity piece. So it's like Connie says, it's infrastructure. And the Planning Commission has been working on the aspect of removing regulatory barriers. So that's another thing where the increased housing is, the end result. It's not a direct thing that you're doing, making affordable housing, but you're removing regulatory barriers. And Act 47, of course, has emphasized that, to allow it to be built if it's going to be built. So doing the public outreach, I think, is going to be, continue to be a thing for us, being in support of these good ideas that have come along. And so I felt like that was the message that I got from the select board, and they're not going to do anything unless we, do something.
Well,
So,
they are leaders
anyway.
responsible, just like you said, they're leaders responsible to constituents, and the constituents have all different kinds of interests and needs, which includes housing. And I was talking to Denise Bernard today, who asked me specifically, is that housing committee just about affordable housing? And I said, it's about housing, and everybody needs it. So there's, she's on the Volunteers Green and Brown Court committee, and is very interested in doing, productive, town enhancing, support the population and quality of life kinds of things, and is very supportive of that. So there is a lot to be said for coming at a problem from the perspective of different committees and joining a common vision together across committees, because the town ultimately operates based on, well, what does everybody think? And if you have common agreement from the Transportation Committee to Recreation to Conservation to, I can't remember all the other ones, planning and housing and so
Mhm.
forth and so on. It's very helpful to the select board to hear that there are so many reasons for doing a good plan at a particular time for a particular price tag. It makes it much easier to say we can make a decision. And even if they say, no, we can't make a decision, we're going to make it a referendum on the next March ballot, there's lots and lots of structured support work done to say to our community, this is why we should do this. So the, many the stand together and you're a lot stronger. The whole idea of a clear message that everybody says, yeah, I can buy into that. That makes sense to me, is going to help this town move forward. And the select board know what to do. They have learned that they have to pay attention to all perspectives. And that is hard to do. They don't have an easy job. So our job is to make that part of their work easier.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
do agree that, I think this committee needs to look at those small tweaks through, and, I think Virginia, you kind of said like the advocacy work, the public outreach, removal of regulatory barriers, like it's going to be much more small actions taken that create a movement or availability of housing in Richmond rather than building a big 30-unit complex, right? I think for me, it's some of like what are some of those other levers that are happening. So I'm curious to hear about the the Jericho presentation next week. I know that they've been doing a lot of work there, and then in Heinsberg. So maybe we also have someone from Heinsberg come and join and talk to us about some of the things that they have done. And I don't know if that would be something that they're speaking at the Jericho folks are speaking at the planning commission next week. Is that what it is?
Mhm.
I don't know if the
Yeah.
planning commission would be interested in hearing from folks in Heinsberg, or if that's something that we do ourselves.
Yeah, well, we could do that as from the housing committee and see if the planning commission would come since they went the other way with it. That would be
Sure.
fine. We could talk to the folks and maybe start by talking to Alex and in Heinsberg and see if there's somebody who is a champion of the affordable housing. I mean, it's nice if people give you land for it. That's really helpful, but
Yes. It is. I mean, that kind of leads back to, with my experience, we're talking Queensbury, which is a very large town in New York, and they had their infrastructure there, but there was always a push for shovel-ready projects, ready to go. And the town didn't necessarily buy it. The town wouldn't do that, but developers would come in and have that ready to go in an industrial park or something along those lines. And that's really the only thing, or the only town approach that I see is to foster a shovel-ready project and have everything lined up for them so that regulatory barrier is less.
Yep.
well, and I mean, the other thing that we could do is to have a proposal for a housing fund. If we wanted to try to raise money to be possibly more nimble in a purchase situation. We brought that idea up. They didn't seem that, I mean, that's another thing that we would have to make an actual proposal to them. All right, so we're proposing that you put on the ballot on this time, at this town meeting, a 1% for a housing fund, which we are writing up the description for. That would be an actual proposal that we could make, is that we could have on the ballot raising money for a housing fund. I've talked briefly to a couple of people with the senior center, because senior housing is something that people in Richmond have expressed an interest in, as opposed to affordable housing, where many people theoretically have an interest in it. But the people who live in Richmond don't necessarily, they already have housing. So, but I can't get them to be political at all. The people in the senior center, they don't want to have anything to do with anything that looks the slightest bit political. So, you know, that's a constituent group that, if it was motivated, there's a lot of people in that age group right now and associated with the senior center. So unless we find someone who would like to spearhead that, putting in money for, you know, senior housing or whatever, or developing a housing fund that could be used for senior housing, for instance. But, you know, I haven't pursued it in a determined fashion. I've just had a couple of conversations with people who are like, nope, we're not political. We do pickleball, but we don't do politics. So,
Right.
You're doing
They want,
pickleball, it doesn't get more political than pickleball.
well, they're going to ask for pickleball courts in Browns Court, so field. So, you know, it all wraps around. The problem with competing for housing in a scarce housing market is that the seller always goes for the highest bidder, right? That's, you
maybe
know that. Well, I mean,
in
you know,
general, yes.
Danny Pete is getting ready to sell more of his farm. That's where I am, is on the edge of his farm on Mary Drive. And, you know, and I see the stakes going up with the pink flags, and I look at the size of the property. I'm going, this is not affordable housing. He
No.
wants to sell it where he can, like, you know, whatever he needs it for, he's giving up his family's land in order to do something else that's important to him. He wants to get as much as he can for that. And it's going to be beautiful, just like the Brad Worthen, you know, sold another piece of property up above us, and that's a gorgeous house. I mean, there's no house like that on Mary Drive. Nothing, no judgment there, everybody who's listening. It's a beautiful house, but it's that these
Right.
folks don't sell it so that it can be affordable housing, and there's no infrastructure of transportation and walkability and biking. I mean, why would they? It's
Yeah.
dangerous to go down Brown's Trace right now. You know, traffic lights, stopping traffic. There's all this road construction. I mean, I wouldn't do it like now, but even in good weather, the traffic goes really fast at 45 miles an hour. Or you could go through Southview. I mean, it's a problem to think about, how would you compete in this current market for property that's being offered when
And
everyone is
builders
hungry for it?
want big lots because they want to build big houses, because that's what remunerates them, is big houses. And to build a big house, you have to have a big lot in order to get the loan. It has to be a proper sized lot. I mean, unless you live on Dorset Street in South Burlington, where you can have little tiny lots and giant houses. But in Richmond, you pretty much have to have a big lot to have a big house.
Right.
So, yeah, I know.
So,
I mean,
so I wasn't trying to like to be disrespectful of the housing fund idea, because it is a viable idea in some situations. I just don't know that this is that moment. That's all. Mark, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking while watching the select board clip on the policy around camping and cars parked overnight, right, in certain areas, and you know, some of the concern of folks in Southview, you know, that is the homeless, the need for affordable housing is now starting to impact Richmond in a real way and the residents here. So that was my thought going through it, right? In terms of trying to get some community support, right? When people feel like it's on their doorstep, then they're more apt to not support something, right? So that was just going through my mind listening to that clip this morning, and maybe there is an opportunity to talk about that situation that's going on and the decision before the select board around what to do with cars parked overnight in
It's,
an
I
area
understand,
around town, right?
I understand from, so this is also an equity issue. Ta-da. So the Richmond Racial Equity Group
Yeah.
is interested in this too. And I heard from one of them that the select board is going to discuss this issue from the perspective of parking violation, which is how it comes
Right.
up for the police, which is a parking violation.
Right.
When what it is the root cause isn't about parking, the root cause is about housing.
Yeah.
So I was planning to go to the select board meeting next week, just as a member of the public, to talk about how important it was to have more sustainable solutions for people who wind up needing, I mean, nobody wants to park, as fall is coming on to us, outdoors in a car. It doesn't actually make your life better. But if there's no option, then that's what you have to do. And I think we have to help figure out that there are other options. And we're not responsible for all of that as a housing committee, but we could certainly be supportive of it.
And, Mark, well, your first thought was, oh, this is bringing this homeless problem home to us here in Richmond. And what is the root cause? You noticed that the reason it came to the select board was because the first thought in most people's minds who were thinking about it was, how can we get rid of the parking? That
Yeah.
it's a parking problem and we don't want these people here, these people parking here. So let's make an ordinance that prevents parking and camping. So, most people are probably in that neighborhood anyway, not thinking what you're thinking or what Connie's thinking or even what I'm thinking. They're thinking basically, how do we get rid of this problem? We prevent parking. So
Right.
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
I was
But
surprised to hear that we don't even have a shelter. I mean, I was a little surprised at that. I thought that we at least had a couple beds somewhere in the town. I don't know why. I mean, we have it in
No.
Essex, we have it here in Burlington, obviously. But for some reason, I don't know what was going through my head, but I thought, that to me would be a fantastic first step, be to get a shelter in. But
Do any little villages have shelters? I mean, Essex and Burlington, maybe South Burlington. I don't know. Does anybody else, towns of 4,000 people? I don't know. I haven't heard of it. Have you guys heard of people funding a shelter? I don't know. The emergency people, the emergency management people, I wonder if they have anything to say about this. They probably don't deal with those kinds of emergencies. But
well, we have short term, like warming centers, like we did that. Remember when there were power outages?
in the
City Hall.
schools and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And the town center and
Town center.
that's it. The major, major events.
I mean,
Right.
we do have a food shelf in Richmond, which I don't know if that's really super common in small towns, right?
I don't know.
Either.
Yeah. And we have, the point of a lot of charitable organizations is to be ready to support people once the need has been identified. This is the first time in my 30 years here where homelessness has risen to the level. I mean, there's been like the occasional, can someone help with this family that showed up for some reason and their car broke down and people chip in or they do something like that. But this sounds like a little more consistent, or it's risen to a new level. Maybe it's just like a moment, but that's my current perception, that there's something going on, that now Richmond's spots where you can park a car in kind of an out of the way place, but not too far from town, is being used for residents. And it's like, wow, what's happening? What's changing? There's something here that's important. And according to Chief Cambridge, I understand, I haven't talked to him directly, the reasons vary very greatly. It's not like one story all the time. There's different stories when he or his officers are trying to address the issue. So I gather that there's a lot for us to learn here before we try to figure out a solution anyway. And I think there's people who are very interested in being helpful in the way that their organizations or their missions or ideas can support that, but we haven't really, as a town, figured it out yet. And it takes someone paying attention to it to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, that is something that we could do. Like I was thinking, all right, have we talked to the churches? They're people that sometimes have this as a mission, right? I don't know. I don't go to church, so I don't know whether they do or they don't, but
They
we could talk
have
to them.
so every organization is different and every organization is glad to talk. And what I think is if the town wants to address whatever the name of this issue is, because I don't think it's exactly homelessness or vagrancy or parking, however they call it, there needs to be somebody who says, let me gather all the information and understand this from different perspectives, including those of the people who are in those cars. And I think over time, the town can figure it out, but I think supporting that, what's the root cause that what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because it's probably not parking, as you said, Virginia, although it certainly comes out like that as a symptom. That's a genuine, distress of being parking on the street at night in your car. But the different things that we can do about it might be also multivariate. And, churches could do one thing, but towns and other people can do other things to help it and other agencies. Because I think there are agencies in Vermont that are very committed to dealing with homelessness. And certainly in Burlington, that's the case. But this is just new for Richmond.
So is this something that we want to do? The housing committee wants to do this work, this research work, which is looking into who works on this area, who.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to the select board meeting next week and ask the question of how do we understand this issue for whatever the issue is at kind of a, is this short-term, long-term? Is this like a sea change? Is there a pattern? Is there, what are some of the resources and options to have the town take it on, not as a passing issue necessarily, but as a thing to figure out. And if I may, I would like to be able to say that I'm a member of a housing committee, the housing committee, which, has, this issue has attracted our attention, and yet we don't think it's necessarily just one issue. And is the town able to dedicate some time and resources to understanding it better? And if so, where would that fall? That's sort of my thought. And that way Josh gets to be part of that conversation, which is his job. And the select board gets to think about it from a more systemic way. And
I can't see them doing that. I mean, I think just listening to them, I think they want a proposal. They want the housing committee to come and say, we'll take care of it. We'll do the research. We'll find out what the problem is, what the possible solutions are, who the players are, who the possible helpers are, and they'd go, fine, go do it. But if you say to them, we want the town to be committed, they're not going to have a clue. Who's going to do it? Josh doesn't have time to do it. Duncan doesn't have time to do it. They don't have time to do it. Emergency management is not going to do it. They're not going to want to do it. It's not in their ballpark.
But the chief of police is interested in this issue because he's being tasked with figuring out what's going on with these cars and people. So
you think he's got time to do that work that you were talking about? I mean,
no, but I think he's got access to the people who, I mean, he has to talk, he or his officers have to start figuring out what to do with the folks that are sleeping over on Richmond streets. So why not ask them to collect information and start putting it together? I mean, I don't have an answer. I haven't like thought about this a lot, but
Yeah,
it
right.
just
Me
seems
neither.
like it
Has
just
this
seems
been
like
a
it's not going to fix itself.
has this been a like a endemic problem? Has this been have there been multiple instances of folks parking and spending nights in their cars on Richmond streets, or was this one instance? It sounds like there was also the man got out of the car and had, I don't know
Was
if assaulted
threatening.
is the right word, or had
Well,
made some
here's
folks in the neighborhood feel uncomfortable. So that's probably what bubbled it up to the top. But I guess has this been a problem? And I don't know if we should ban parking because if there was only one instance, that we should ban parking on the streets.
my impression is that it's not one instance, but there was one instance of discomfort like that you were just describing. But I think that's why going to the select board, because Chief Cambridge, at least he has some data. He knows how often is this happening? How long has it been happening for? What do we know about this from the past? Has this been an issue in Richmond in the past? And we're just having like, a little, somebody got poked and they raised an issue. What do we already know about this? And I think it's reasonable to ask him to try to report on that. Although, and he lives in our community, so that's actually a bonus. He can probably share what he knows, and then,
But he hasn't been in Richmond as a policeman for that long, right? I mean,
no,
it's only
2
been a
months.
couple of months that
No,
how is he going to
no,
have this data? I don't understand how he's
because
going to have it.
because traffic data is collected by the state. So if you have a car and the police have like a need to talk with you about your car, they have to report that. This is a car, so he and his officers can use the historical database to find out what is going on in terms of our history. He should have those data. And in fact, the equity committee, Richmond Racial Equity, has been saying, you have to post that data. And there's been a struggle around that, mostly due to lack of staff, the Richmond side, but Heinsberg does that. And Burlington does that. And a lot of places post this data so that you and I can look it up and figure it out. But we can't with Richmond right now. So we're going to need some help. So I know there's information that can help us, maybe not a lot. And then there'll be recent anecdotal information about what seems to be happening right now. And if we can find out whatever there is to find out, maybe we'd have a better handle on saying, how can the housing committee or any other committee in the town or administrative function in the town think about how do we help people who are in Richmond for whatever reason and for how long they're in Richmond. And they're therefore, to some degree, our responsibility to understand and make sure things are going as well as they can go. I mean, there's long-term and short-term issues with every really fundamental problem in the world, and we're just seeing the Richmond version of that here.
So just
Will the police have had to, I mean, we haven't had any no overnight parking in that location. So maybe people have been parking there, but would they have been reported to the police? Would the police have anything to do with them if they were not obstructing
Well, you know
an
what?
ordinance in some
I'm
case?
feeling somewhat inspired to email Chief Cambridge and say, what do you know about these overnight the housing committee met and talked and is like trying to figure this out and may not have anything to offer, but we would like to know what there is to know. And let me just not even wait till next week. Let me just ask him. I will copy Mark since I'm not supposed to do any decision-making kind of activities with the whole group. So I'll copy you, Mark, and we'll see what he says. And I'll do that tonight because that's not that hard to do. All right.
All
Yeah, I
right.
mean, it certainly would be good to know what the extent of this problem is. I don't think we even know that. And I think that's what you're alluding to also, Connie. So, yeah, I have no idea. Is it one person, 10 people, 5 cars, 1 car? How many tents? I have no clue.
Yep.
Yeah,
That'd
this
be
is the only one I've heard about from anyone, this particular one. I mean, they've had problems at Volunteers Green with some drug issues in that parking lot. But That's
Yeah.
all.
Well, let
Just being
me ask.
cognizant of time here. I know I think Keith, you got to run to another meeting here.
I have a
minute.
question that's
Yes.
related to another of our agenda topics. And I think I could just ask the question. Under ideas for membership recruitment, Rachel Rachel Lohia, who is on Borden Street, is very interested in joining our committee if we can meet either in the morning or early afternoon. And I don't know if that's logistically possible for everybody here.
That would be really tough for me, just with normal work schedule.
This is our, yeah, you have,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know what Keith or Virginia, your schedules are like. Do we have committees that meet in the morning, afternoon?
There are some committees that meet in the afternoon, yes. But typically it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, 5:30 in our case. It's not unheard of. I mean, I'm available.
I'm fine. I can meet anytime, but for people who actually go to work, pretty hard.
Yeah, it's also hard for people to chime in if you want to have a public comment, during the day too. And it's kind of the purpose of having the meetings at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people with
That yin and
kids,
yang.
the school day is a time when they have discretionary time. And I happen to have a very flexible schedule. I work, but I work when I want to work, as long as I get all my stuff done. So I could be flexible. But I don't know, I have to just leave it to whether or not, Mark, if you don't feel like that's flexibility you can give, then the answer is no.
Yeah,
Rachel.
it'd be pretty tough.
Yeah.
To be able to do
Okay.
that.
Yeah. What's the
Which is a
earliest
bummer.
we could? Well, is there any earlier that we could meet than 5:30 for you?
I mean, I could probably get away with 5 o'clock, but
Okay.
probably the earliest.
Should I ask her if 5 o'clock is a possibility?
You can.
She said
ask-
early afternoon, which is 5 o'clock is not considered early
That's not-
afternoon. Not really. Yeah.
That'd be like 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 or 2.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Then
Yeah, which is a
not
bummer.
at this
Plugging
time.
along.
Yeah.
I
right.
know. Yeah, we're right at time here.
Thanks.
Any action items? Maybe I'll reach out to Heinsberg crew and see if anyone would like to housing committee and see if anyone would like to join us next month. And then I think continue recruitment activities where you can.
Thank you.
Their business or correspondence. I know we didn't get to Act 47, so I think we'll talk a little bit more about
Oh,
that.
yeah, we're still working along at the Planning Commission, and hopefully that will require some support and advocacy. Act 47 is all about housing, so when it comes time for us to have our public hearing and then the select board public hearing on those village neighborhoods, then hopefully we can do some more of that advocacy work that we did around the last batch.
Okay.
Our next meeting is October 25th.
Sounds right.
Okay, at 5:30. All right. I can fill everything else in and keep going on this. I'll send out the
Okay.
notes. Virginia, do you have time to look at
Yes.
the notes?
Sure.
Okay, I'll send them to
Anytime.
you.
Yeah. You
Thanks.
lay it out all so neatly and exactly, and it's great. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
just fill in a couple of things. So
That's great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Virginia.
no
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Well, we'll call the meeting here at 6:59.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Mark,
all.
and everybody. Have a
Great.
good night.
All right.
Thank
good night.
you.
Have a great
You all as
evening.
well.
Bye. You bet.